Folks, welcome to Mid-City, New Orleans, and have an opportunity here to interview New Orleans First Lady of Music, High Priestess Deborah Vidacovich. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake.
You know, can you just talk to the audience a little bit about your upbringing as it relates to music? Did you perform? Were you in theater? Or did you just get off on music itself?
Well, I was born and raised in New Orleans, and I always loved music. Used to go to the warehouse every weekend to see rock bands, and that kind of thing. I sang in bands when I was a teenager, did a lot of theater, and then I married John, and really didn't go into that as much, more into the business end.
Well, let's just when you talk about singing, was it rock? Were you a doo-wopper? I mean,
it was definitely singing in show bands, 50s music, pop tunes, pure Prairie League, stuff like that.
Country western, things like that. Yeah.
But that was mostly singing on the streets as a teenager.
How common? We got the coffee maker going. How much street music? I'm very obsessed with the stifling of our culture, not in New Orleans, but you go to Harlem now, it's very gentrified. You go to places that used to be bastions of culture, and it's kind of been pushed off the streets. Can you talk about things that just the amount of culture that you were part of that was always on the streets, the fact that you could actually be creative on the streets and how that came out?
Well, sure. We supported ourselves singing on the streets when I was a teenager. You know, 3 girls. We sang on the streets for tips. And, of course, you could live in New Orleans for nothing at the time. But there's always been a strong street music culture in New Orleans. There still is. It just happens to be mostly out-of-towners. When I was a kid, though, it was all locals singing on the street. We were from here. People didn't really move here to do it. It was us.
And would you say that could you sing for the audience?
No.
What how much of the regional sounds of New Orleans did you incorporate into your music? Were you singing original stuff, or was it all just
not really at all. Not really at all. We did a lot of cover tunes, a lot of, at the time we were trying to do more of a Joni Mitchell, pure Prairie League type of thing. We had 3 girls and a guitar, so we were limited by that. But, when you're on the streets, you can always pick up and move on too. You can pick your audiences a little more than you can if you're inside. We liked being out at the time, but I remember getting our first gig inside. It was exhilarating. We were going to be inside.
Where was the gig?
At the show bar on Bourbon Street.
Did you have was Johnny like the rhythm section for the band?
No, I didn't know him. This was before I met him.
So you guys were just singing a cappella, like in a vocal trio, but was there a rhythm section at all?
Not at first. No, and we worked at Jed's as well on Sunday afternoons. So we got a couple of inside jobs. And that was the beginning of the end of us. It was too swell.
I want you to talk about the significance of the feminine aesthetic as it relates to culture and music in general. How important especially as we move into the future here, the significance of music has changed a lot in our culture, especially with younger cats. It can be, I was telling you before, maybe it's used more for pacification, or people might be multitasking when they listen to music. But especially down here in New Orleans, it was always considered a spiritual, if not tribal, thing. How does the feminine quality? I mean, talk about the female aesthetic as it relates to the importance of music.
I mean, we're still out in the street in New Orleans. We're not. I don't think we're quietly listening. I think we're part of it all. We're in the middle of everything. I don't feel held back by my gender. But, Johnny and I are a big part of a lot of different scenes. I'm a baby doll with Chief Monk Boudreaux, so we go out on the streets, and I feel there's a big presence in the tribe of the female. We're part of it. I don't feel held back.
No, I didn't mean it. Can you talk about, can you go deeper in this female tribe with Monk? I didn't know you were tell me the title that you have again. You're a
Baby doll.
You're a baby doll.
We're part of the Mardi Gras culture. We go out on Mardi Gras morning. We go to Monk's house, wait for him to come out, then we all walk. It's Indians, skeletons, and baby dolls, and drummers. Don't forget the drummers. And there are female Indians, but I'm in the baby dolls.
What kind of garb do you? I mean, you're not.
We dress like a baby doll. We have costumes. We make different costumes every year, different colors. Monk sets down the color, then we get our costumes together, and we do it. We do a different one every year, and we only go out. We go out with him a couple times a year. St. Joseph's Day and Mardi Gras Day.
St. Joseph's Day. When is this day?
This is in March. It's after Mardi Gras.
I did an interview with Bo Dallas Jr. and he was talking about his father in the 70s. The message was, stop killing each other. Stop going after each other. There should be more. I don't know, for lack of a better word, love between the different tribes. When did you get hip to the Mardi Gras Indians, and was there can you talk about those older sages and how they kept things, just sort of the history of the Mardi Gras Indians? It's a fascinating thing for me.
Well, in the older days, when we would march and run into another tribe, the tribes would fight. That was the tradition. They would fight. And now the tradition is we meet each other in the street and we sing songs about who's the prettiest. We want to be the prettiest.
Oh, I love it.
And so it's more about that. It's much more of an embrace. But it's a complete honor. You can't be in it. You can't decide to do it. You can't pay to do it. You have to be invited by the chief, or you can't do it. And so it's a wonderful thing. I'm very proud of it. Johnny's known Monk and played with Monk for many, many, many years. So it's a big honor to be in his troupe.
I don't want you to, let's not kid ourselves though. Deborah Vidacovich didn't get invited because of Johnny. You got invited because of why? Why were you invited?
Because Monk loves me.
Because you're a baby doll.
Because I'm a baby doll.
But that, going back, why was it a turf war with these guys? Why were they would physically get into fights?
Oh, this was, in the old days. Yeah, they were, and I was never a part of it. This, for always, since I've done it, it's always been about love.
I wanted you to talk. I'm just trying to get the timeline here of when you guys, did you leave town when Katrina hit?
We did. Everyone did.
Well, some didn't. Obviously,
well, some didn't. But I mean, there was no electricity. The house sat in water. There was no way to stay.
So did you go out of the state actually?
We went to Houston for 3 months, and when they opened the city, we came back.
A big one of the L's on my program is life, about overcoming adversity, and I know you guys everybody deals with adversity, but I would like you to talk about that initial feeling of coming back to this house, the sacred house, and the feeling of that you had. Was it a feeling right away of? Was it despair? Was it we're going to overcome this? Was it shock? Could you just, because some of the material stuff like the rotting, that was, you didn't find out about till after you moved back in, is that right?
The feeling was overwhelming. It was everything. It was everything you ever knew, and your whole entire life is broken. Every bank, every school, every place you ever went, every ice cream shop, every street sign, every thing, everything. And everywhere, just piles of garbage everywhere. It was overwhelming. But just the pure blanket coverage of destruction was kind of awful. Awful to drive around for a couple of years. We didn't have street signs or traffic lights or, anything.
Even in, and we're in mid city here.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you had no street lights
For 2 years.
for 2 years. No street lights.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was nothing.
When did you start to begin to see the light in terms of just being able to stay and rebuild this?
Well, we do that. We saw the light as soon as they opened the city. We knew we'd come home and stay, but it wasn't easy. But what you gonna do? It's you can move away and let the millionaires buy it, or you can just go home. But you couldn't do both. You couldn't do both. You couldn't pay for your life in New Orleans and stay in Houston. You had to decide.
Let me just get that. You couldn't pay for your life in New Orleans and stay in Houston. You either had to.
We owned a house. We had things we couldn't. We had to continue to pay for here. I mean, you're not off the hook of anything when a hurricane comes. You still have a house note. You still have bills. You have to come home and either divest yourself of what you have left or walk away. We weren't going to walk away.
And as far as it was just very touching because I was reading that Johnny had trigger finger at that time, or around that time he woke up and he couldn't.
After, yeah.
Slightly after, so it was like he was like, well, is this it? 50 years of drumming, is that it? How are we going to pay for the repairs?
Scary.
And then cats like Stanton Moore, and I don't want to, Papa Molly, all these, it's kind of interesting because your tentacles are so far out in all the different music here. I think you look at music as music, right? There's no genres. Can you talk about that divine thing where cats, women, and just people came in?
That was amazing because, of course, like a lot of people, even though we had insurance, the insurance didn't cover anything. For example, we got $50 a giant tree to take a giant tree out, which cost $2,000, but the insurance company gave us $50.
$50.
Yeah, $50.
That's.
It was so you can't. It's just. And people came forward and people helped us and we pulled our house back together. Without their help, we would have never been able to do it. Certainly not on what we got from the federal government because that wouldn't have paid for anything.
How, in your mind, this is my maiden voyage. I've never been to New Orleans before, and it's such an honor to be in Casa Vidacovich. But, when I talked to George Porter Jr., he was really bummed. He just is sort of in shock of what's happened to Bourbon Street since Katrina. Can you, just to the layperson or to some cat that's going to watch this in 50 years after we're gone, what has become? How has Katrina affected at least Bourbon Street? I know there's still plenty of there's hotbeds of music everywhere, but
when I was a teenager, Bourbon Street was X-rated. And it was run like a clock. There were police everywhere. There were the same 2 police every 2 blocks every night. You knew who they were, they knew who you were. There was no funny business. If you messed up, you were taken accountable. Now there's no accountability. There's no music. There's nothing but crime. It's disgusting. It's quadruple X. It's dangerous. It doesn't smell good. It's 10 by 12 blocks. It's not that big, fellas. It's the cash cow of the state. What the hell? Can't you take care of it? It seems to me it could be run better. I know it can be run better. I lived in the French Quarter when I was a teenager, and it was not a scary place. It's a scary place now, and it's too good. It's too historic. It's too beautiful to let go. How can you let it go? Everything's about money. Everything's about money. What can we take? There's some things that are sacred. It doesn't have anything to do with money. Our history, our culture, our dreams, those are not for sale. But they figured out a way.
I just want to clarify some things. You said there was accountability back in the X-rated days. What does that? You mean if you were caught with a joint, you go to jail? I mean, what does that mean? Accountability.
It means that they knew what your name was and they'd call you out.
I see.
You know.
Deborah, you know better than that.
You're messing up, yeah. You know, the older guys on the street talked to me. You know, I mean, there was a camaraderie, and people just didn't. If you messed up too bad, you know, people knew who you are, and they would take care of it.
And post Katrina, that's when things began to become. I don't know, craven or more. I mean, what you're talking about kind of a predatory vibe down there in some ways.
Well, it's just not.
It's not safe, you said.
It's not as safe as no, it's not. I don't think that. You know, there's not a lot of locals down there.
I see.
There's just not a lot of locals.
Very
down
transient.
there. It's very transient in nature. That goes for everyone that lives and works in the quarter, which to a certain extent it's always been that way.
Right.
But I don't know. I just see more of and it's not just in the French Quarter, just more of I hope people are not as hopeful maybe as they used to be. They're not, you know, people are just being crushed down, I think. And if you don't value your life, why would you value anyone else's?
Well, that's you have to love yourself first before you can love. That's an amazing. If you, I'm not saying that you're a soothsayer or anything like that, but what are some of the smaller steps that people can take that are watching this, that are local, that, or even not local, but you know, that can start to, because you said there's some things that are sacred. Mm-hmm. This is one of them, mm-hmm. and it can be mm-hmm. a place of accountability or not as transient. What would be some of those steps? I mean, because you are so deep in it.
Invest in the future. Start working with kids. Figure out a way. Johnny and I beg, borrow, and steal to do music workshops. They're free for any kid. I do them every 2 weeks.
Wow.
And, you know, if anything you can do, volunteer at a school, pay for kids' lunches. If you don't have time, then do that. If that's the one thing you do, go to your local school and find out how much money's owed for kids for lunch. Pay for that. Pay it off. You know, pay it forward. If you know, you have to value kids. If you don't value kids, our world's doomed.
You're 100% right. Your daughter is how old now?
37.
No longer a kid. I mean, she
No.
is a full on.
No.
She's in it. But it's really hard when you have a large portion of the population in Arizona, where I'm from, and also in Louisiana, that actually are not looking forward. They're trying to go backward. What do you say to people that have a conscience, that are in touch with themselves, but their social circles are all groupthink, and they all believe that there is, like, pay it forward. These things, it's all about the future. But at this point in our current time, there's these made-up crises that can be easily solved, but people don't want to because quite frankly, our skin color as a country is changing, which to me is to be embraced. My family is multicultural. I love it. New Orleans is a complete bastion of it.
Sure.
So what do you do when you run into peeps like that?
I say turn off the TV. Look around.
What if they're just talking to... Yeah, I know, but I mean, a lot of them are listening to their relatives and their church groups and, you know...
Then get your church group involved with kids. Start doing some, you know, volunteer to coach. Do it you know, it's got to be about the future. It's got to be about the kids, because otherwise, what have we got? You know, look what we've done. Look what we've done. You know, there's better. You know, you want to see goodness? Go hang out with a kid. It'll make you feel better. You know.
What does the workshop look like? I mean, I can't see you up there. You're not an ethnomusicologist. You're a vibe.
What do I do? I hire. My thoughts on this is about kids work in their rooms. They practice to CDs. They most often, sometimes they're in their bands at school, But what I want them to do is, I want them to train their ears. I want them
Yes.
to listen. And I want them to play something that they did in practice. And so what I do is, I have a friend who donates a space. It's a studio, so there's equipment and backline. And the kids come in and I hire a band. The drummers work with the drums, guitar players work with the guitar, piano player works. It goes like that. We all get up at once and we learn songs together. And then at the end, the kids use the band as a background band, which is sometimes pretty funny. But we've had everybody from Common to we've had George Porter's done a meters workshop with them. We've had Mike Dillon, and I mean everybody I can get a phone number of has done it, and it's just an amazing program. I've been doing it for 13 years, and the kids we've cycled through a bunch of them, and some of them are musicians and some of them aren't. Some have gotten really great scholarships at Berkeley, and we're really proud of the kids, that's for sure. But it's just something that we do every 2 weeks. And
Is it just a one-day thing, or does it go for a meters workshop? Seems to be hard to put it in for 1 day.
We do one every 2 weeks, and Anders has done songwriting workshops with us. And, yeah, it's just one. It's a 2-hour workshop, but we've been doing it every 2 weeks for 13 years, so we figure it out.
You are. We're talking to a serious purveyor of your taste. Your aesthetic and taste is very classic. I mean, you seem to find different cats for Johnny to play with that he may not even be aware of. How long since you guys have been together? I mean, obviously I'm still going to try to get that story straight before we get off the air, but the whole Nola Tet thing. But going back, when was the first time that you came to Johnny and said, "Listen, I've got these cats," because you've been somebody who's always searching for this sort of esoteric genius that otherwise could be missed.
It actually just started because he got this steady gig at Funky Butt, which at the time was on Rampart Street, and it was weekly, and he was using different guys, and he was just driving himself crazy booking it. And so I said, "Look, just make a list of guys that you want to play with, and I'll hire those guys." And that probably lasted a couple weeks. And then at the same time, a friend of ours had opened this club across the river called Old Point, and he asked me to bartend. And I don't even drink, and I have no idea what different alcohols are. If you said to me Shiner Bock, I would have to say, "Is that bourbon?"
Right.
I have no
You
idea.
were flying blind, but you took
I had no idea.
Yeah.
But, so I took the job and I hated it. I quit the first day. And then he said, "Well, what if there was music?" And I said, "Well, what if I picked the band?" And he said, "Fine, you can pick the band." So I thought this was my brilliant idea. We could do, because at the time, the mix at the Funky Butt was starting to be it was starting to be a little jazz and a little funky. And
What year is it? Like early 80s?
this
or
was this was 90s.
in the 90s?
It was in the 90s.
So it was a
And-
smorgasbord of things.
Yeah, and so I thought, well, if I have the 2 gigs, and at the time Johnny pretty much wanted to play jazz, so I thought, well, I could do jazz at the Funky Butt, and then I could do funk over at the Old Point, and that's how it'll be. And I'll see if I can get James Singleton to play with him at the Funky Butt and George Porter to play with him at the Old Point.
Perfect.
And John was like, "There's no way he's going to do it because he's so busy." And I was like, "Let's just ask him." And
Singles or Porter or both?
well, at the time it was George, because Johnny and Singleton were working together quite a bit.
Of course.
So I asked George, and he was into it. And so he started doing it, and that's how we originally started doing it.
And how did it grow from there? How beautiful is it to see something grow? That is divine. You took the job because you were... The bartending thing had really nothing to do with that just fell into your lap.
I didn't want to do it. I really didn't. And the only reason I kept doing it was because just a couple months after I took the job, it was Jazz Fest. And booking Jazz Fest was magic to me. this was when I met Carl Denson and all these Skerrick and
Scarrick's tuning in right now.
and
Yeah,
all these wonderful people, and I was like, I have to do this. You know, this is it. You know, this is what we want to do, and so, you know, it was just like that taste was, it was everything, and it really grew from that. It grew from that first Jazz Fest of just meeting all these, you know, these amazing people that I knew I wanted John to play with some more.
And for the most part, these were cats that Johnny was aware of but had not met before, so you were kind of
We
bringing...
didn't know who any of them were.
That's
we really didn't.
classic.
We didn't, you know.
But they knew the name, right? I mean...
Well, you know, for some of them, you know, I mean, I knew who Medeski, Martin, and Wood were, but you know, getting Chris Wood to play with Johnny was kind of like magic, and you know, some of the guys I didn't know who they were at all, you know, like North Mississippi All Stars. Those were like, we met them at ASCAP Awards. Because the Meters hadn't played together in 24 years, so Laura and I drove to I guess Nashville, Memphis, I don't remember where we went, but the bands that they hired to play in the Pyramid were Astro Project.
Memphis. That's Memphis.
Was in Memphis. Astro Project and North Mississippi All Stars.
Wow.
And they were teenagers, and Luther and I were just talking about that. So after the show, I just kind of went back and tried to find him and asked him if he'd come and play, and he was, yeah, I want to do it. But it was a lot, at the beginning it was a lot like that, you know, like I'd hear somebody on the radio and go, oh, maybe that would be great.
Right, and then you just find a way to...
Find a phone number.
Right,
and
right.
A lot of times back then it was definitely introductions on stage.
You don't consider yourself a journalist, though.
No.
I mean, because there's a lot of investigative journalism or investigative work that has to go on to find something. This, again, the internet, once the internet came in, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, that made it a lot easier.
But before...
You could listen to people. But,
right.
But it's even more, you know, it's even more than that. Because, you know, Johnny and George are, like, very picky. And not that easy to please. And they're masters. And James Singleton is a master. And you can't just say, "Oh, well, that's cute," you know.
No, you know, it's
because
so,
how long will they let you do it for if you're not really like? The person has to be so special, you know. It has to be something, and to fit in, you know, like several years ago, George signed with a new management company, and they signed exclusives during Jazz Fest. So I was no longer able to use George, and George is irreplaceable on a lot of our gigs. And so I just about had a nervous breakdown because some of the gigs we've been doing for 20 years, you know, so who would fit in? Well, O'Teal fit in just beautifully. And what a beautiful
my man, what a beautiful
family.
cat. Kofi, have you got Kofi down here too?
Yes,
I love that
absolutely.
guy, dude. Love that cat.
In fact, O'Teal came the day after the Allman Brothers went down. He flew to New Orleans, which was amazing for us, you know, because we were just in love with him. It was perfect.
Yeah, well...
Perfect timing. You know, how lucky are we? You know, how lucky are we to have these people just be there? And Chris Wood last year, oh my God, because O'Teal didn't come. That's crazy that we can have that beautiful connection for so many years with people.
I was sitting next to Johnny last night on the stage and trying to give as much visceral energy to the group as possible, and then in the second set I moved over towards Torque and I was farther away and they were still cooking, but Johnny feeds off the audience so much, and I wound up in the middle and it just bouncing along, and it just started to groove again. How can you talk about the intention of you personally as an audience member? What is your intention when you go to a gig, whether it's Johnny's gig or any other? What do you want to bring? What are those tangible elements that you can bring to help create spiritual music?
I don't want to bring anything. I just want to open myself and let it just pass through me. Just to have that connection, to be receptive, to, you know, and if I add anything to it, I just want it to be a mirror of the music back. You know, I don't want to make any noise or anything like that. Just to feel it pass through and back. Just that energy mirrored back, more so than anything. Yeah, I think that would be it.
With younger kids, because I mean, Kenny Barron told me so beautifully. You know, if you want to touch people's hearts, then you have to be able to be touched. If you want to make people cry, then you have to be able to feel that and be able to cry. You know, my daughters and younger generations have had essentially machine parts and digital music crunched into their ears for a long time now. And my thesis is that if you get enough of that stuff, you stop detecting authentic human music, and so you stop feeling. Do you work with the kids at the workshops on feeling the music?
Well,
or that's just more about letting the body dance and letting it go?
yeah, I think it's more about that. The kids I'm working with are more or less working on muscle memory. They can't do that until they forget what they're doing. They have to have the muscle memory in order to let go. You know, until it becomes automatic, then you can't put the feeling in, you know, because you're too worried about what you're playing on the 2 and the 4.
Absolutely.
And the 1 and the 3.
No, you're nailing. I mean, how do you get them out of their? I do that on the radio all the time. How do you get them out of their original mindset so they're not thinking?
A lot of times we make them do stuff way outside their comfort zone.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, like just play music that they don't sing all the time, don't play all the time. You know, the girl who sings Broadway music, yeah, we're going to make you sing The White Stripes. Or we might make you sing something from Frozen. Or, you know, whatever. You know, it's going to be, you don't, you know, we're going to play some songs. You don't get to pick the genre. It has to be music. The end.
I love it. When did that come into play for you? I mean, I've only gotten hip to the Duke Ellington School since I've been on the radio for the last 7 years, and
Yeah. We're from New Orleans.
right.
It means something. It means you can play everything, and it means you're going to be the best. And I tell my kids that all the time. Don't let me down. You're from New Orleans. It means you're going to... If you think Johnny picks the music, hell no. We have a mortgage. Johnny can put on a bow tie and play with a Dixieland band. Johnny can play Pink Floyd with the symphony. Johnny can play... He can rock out. He can play with the Allman Brothers. We just did it. He can do...
With J-Mo.
Yeah, he can... And he can play the Grave of Dead stuff. He can play jazz. He can play everything. He doesn't... He loves... If it's... you know what? There's no bad musicians. There's no bad songs, just bad musicians. The end.
Clearly, we're taking a trip around on this lifetime in this body one time, and I don't want you to leave anybody out, but especially from the female side of the young female leaders in this town, who do you want to give I mean, you are part of Lineage is another L on my program, and normally that traces back to what you just described, Sam Cooke and Ray Charles and Bill Monroe and bluegrass and Bird and jazz and Fats Domino. But as far as people that are going to cultivate the scene, who are some people you'd like to give a shout out to?
I know Leah Chase is still teaching a lot of young vocalists. Leah Chase and Jermaine Basil and and so many of the younger girls are working in the production end. Just amazing. Girls are taking over.
Can you talk about the production stuff? I mean, is it like, you mean the...
There's a lot of girls that are doing production managers for a lot of
Wow.
bands. Like from Galactic and a lot of bands. Crew is pretty heavy with the females at this point. So yeah, that's happening, which is pretty amazing.
what else gives you what gives you hope and that helps you look towards the light in this time? New Orleans really is, truthfully, the last regional bastion of music. I mean, just being down here, there's something. I mean, I've barely gotten out, but I already can feel it, and that used to be the case in every regional pocket of this country. So, I mean, like, what continues to drive you, and also, helping you look towards the light, even in these times when, for instance, when Porter gets exclusive management, and all of a sudden, boom, he's gone. Then O'Teal comes in.
But he's back.
He's back, of course. Of course, that wouldn't last very long. But I mean, how do you continue? What do you see that is exciting for you?
Well, for me, it's my workshops and my kids. I mean, I see these kids. You can't just sit back and say, what's happening to our culture? Everything's becoming so the same.
Homogenized, right?
You can't just sit back there and say it unless you celebrate your culture, unless you expand your culture, unless you do what you can. Become involved in your city's culture. Go after what you guys are, wherever you're from. If you're from Cincinnati and they want to do, I don't know, eat geta and whatever the heck, do that. They have a geta fest. Yes. Just embrace it and don't let your kids forget it, and try not to watch too much of the news and get too depressed, and go ahead and don't say who's going to do it. Just go ahead and do it.
Right, and there's many different forms. I mean, that's what I'm doing on my radio show. Instead of sitting around and sort of looking in these, because it's overwhelming. You won't be able to take on all these macro things.
But we're lucky, in New Orleans. We have the marching bands in school. We have the Indians. We have a deep culture. It's so easy to get involved. It's really, because you don't have to be an Indian to be involved. Just go stand out front of Monk's house during Mardi Gras Day. Walk with him. Anybody can do that.
Really? Anybody can? I thought you said it was. I thought you had to be chosen, though.
Oh, anybody can follow us. Anybody can follow us.
So it's Indians, baby dolls, and I'm sorry, who else? What?
Skeletons and drummers.
And followers.
And followers.
And followers.
A bunch of people follow us.
Oh, I dig. That's unreal.
We're going to great places. We're going to Second and Dryad, so we're going to have some fun.
One cat that threw on the Indian suit in the 70s was Charlie Neville.
Oh yeah, Charles Neville.
Chupatulas with the can you talk? Chapatulas. Can you? I mean, Charlie's the only, rest in peace. I did 2 great interviews. I love him so much, and but just in general, the Neville brothers, they're kind of how you feel about what their legacy is to music. I mean, how much they've influenced every
everything. They're everything. That's us. That's who we are. We're the Nevilles, That's Charles and Cyril, and that's everything. The first, one of the first families in New Orleans music. Between the Nevilles and the Meters and all that. That's like invented funk. Forget about it. That's I'm surprised with if. You just get out and listen. I would say to people, don't say what you like. Just go listen to some other stuff, because you never know what you like. Maybe you liked something when you were a teenager. You might like a lot more now. There's a lot out there, and I'd say check into some Neville Brothers for sure.
Were you singing on Bourbon Street back in the day?
Yeah.
So would it be like a set of music and then some dancers, and then what would be the set list?
We had an Elvis impersonator.
I love this.
We had a guy that ate glass.
So he would come, the Elvis person?
Iron Jaw Sampson, and he would go table to table. He'd eat anything out of your purse. He would
Iron Jaw Sampson.
Iron Jaw Sampson. He could eat anything. Some drink bleach. It was crazy, but yeah, we had an Elvis impersonator. Yeah, that's how it was.
Did you sing? Did you? Did you sing some Aretha tunes?
No, I never sang like Aretha.
Did you? Did I mean? But you were a fan of hers, or are you a fan of hers?
Absolutely, yeah. But I never did have that kind of voice.
No, I'm just saying the fact is that she's not doing so well
Yes,
right now.
I
You know.
heard. Yeah.
I just want to get the story straight for the record, because actually I connected through Kevin Calabro, brilliant publicist, great guy. He connected me with Brian Haas and Johnny, and then from there I met James and Mike. But how did Nola Tet come together? You played a major role in that?
Did I?
I just what's your memory of it?
My memory of it is I put John and Jacob Fred, smush, and it came.
So Reed Mathis was in the.
It was the original Jacob Fred,
Yeah.
and part of my shtick is to add John to a band. They don't have to. It could be double drums, or I can replace their drummer, and so we did some Jacob Vidacovich, and
Oh, that's unbelievable. Jacob Vidacovich.
yes, we did. We did the dead. We did. We did. We've done some conglomerations, some really funny band smashes, but that's how it started. Just smashing together different things.
So James and Johnny, their lineage goes back. But Haas was Jacob Fred, and then when did you first meet Mike Dillon?
Again, I met everyone at Old Point, I think.
Old Point.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually, what do you think about? I mean, Nola Tet just had an article put in Jazz Times. I didn't read it yet. Obviously, I've been doing a lot of chronicling of it. What do you think about that band?
I think they're hysterical.
They are hysterical, right? There's a lot of Go ahead.
To me, it sounds like a syncopated, demented circus music.
Especially when Haas starts playing the melodica.
Thank you. It's
Diddly-dee.
so crazy, and it's just, I'd say I don't understand the connection people have to it, but I do, because it sounds so happy. I guess it sounds happy and it's spontaneous for sure, and joyous, but it's demented. It's crazy. It's crazy sounding.
It's mind-melting.
You wouldn't think people would like it as much as they do, because it is out there.
But isn't it the authenticity factor that's what people love about it? If they can feel it.
And again, it's like four guys that are just top of their game. Top of their game. And that's my whole thing, is always to use guys that are top of their game. I don't use anybody that's bad.
Right. I mean, could you?
It's my whole secret.
Without mentioning names, I just want to be, because nothing's perfect in life, and you talk about these collaborations at the Funky Bud and the other club, Point. There have been train wrecks for you before, where you've had, or are you batting 100% when it comes to the collaboration part of it?
There's been some that are so magical that you can't hardly even remember what it was like before you heard it. And there's been some people who have been intimidated by the process, but I've always enjoyed every single one. Even if we've had some people who just, again, it's a difficult process. Johnny and George have played together 50 years. I want you to come in. You don't know them. I want you're the voice of the band, this third person. You have, not that you were going to start every melody, but it's a big weight. And here you are working with a couple of guys that you may or may not idolize. And so it can be intimidating. And some people have been intimidated. I won't say they were bad. They perhaps didn't play as much as I wanted them to. But George and John don't really need anybody else. just means they worked a little harder that night. They're still going to entertain you. It's still going to blow your mind. But it'll just be Johnny and George, who have played duos, and they are really great. Their duos are really great. So, has it been bad? It's never bad.
You sound like you are the artistic director of these things. I mean, if you were bringing in it was intentional in some ways, where you'd bring in Johnny and George started playing in '66 together,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'd find either some other cat to play a third voice, but you'd actually meet with them in advance, say, listen, this is what.
Oh yeah, I'm the one I've programmed the trio since it started.
What an exhilarating! That's so. I mean, maybe you're too close to it. I mean, obviously you know how special it is, but there is a gift to it. I really dig the entire process, and it's funny. I've never seen. These guys are such great artists, but I've never. You said they're very picky, but I've never seen them. I've never seen them be that rigid or uptight on the bandstand.
Never, ever. You would never know it. They just tell me afterwards.
I got it. Right. It's so, before I let you go, people are having a ball watching this. Billy Ayuso's tuning in. And
Hey, Billy. Billy's done the trio.
Billy's great. Billy
with the
did a
trio.
great. Billy's done so much tribute concerts,
absolutely.
so much beautiful stuff.
And Johnny's done Grateful Dead with Billy as well.
Why do you love your mother?
Why do I love my mother? I love my mom because, because she's my mom, but I like her with Johnny. I like to watch her with John. She's his biggest fan, and it's really sweet. She's very, my mom's a trip. She's a very strong woman. Yeah, you could stand on her.
Do you remember I remember my dad was Jewish, and he went to Saginaw, Michigan, and he fell in love with my mom in Western Michigan, and he was walking into essentially Roman Catholic house. I'm not exactly sure what their denomination was, but he was Jewish, and when they left the first time, my mother-in-law took my mom's arm. She goes, "I really love Richie a lot." Was there a seminal moment when she's Johnny's biggest fan? But was there a moment early on that when that was crystallized?
Well, maybe not the answer to that question, but I do remember when I first started going out with John, I went home and I said, "Mom," he said, "he plays jazz." And we were both like, "Oh, it's jazz." And we were like, "Okay, well, let's find it on the radio." So we got the radio out. We started turning the knob. Is this jazz? I don't think that's jazz.
So you weren't that hit. You were just sort of
had no
geeked
idea.
up about it, but you didn't know
had
about
no idea. I was totally, Led Zeppelin,
right.
into rock, going to the warehouse every week, and had no idea. Jazz. I thought that jazz to me was Dixieland. I didn't know there was anything that young people listen to jazz.
Right. And then, did you actually hear Johnny on the radio at some point, or did that ever materialize?
No, I lived above a jazz club. I moved in above a jazz club, and I thought, well, this is pretty good live. You couldn't deny it. It was Henry Butler and John Vidacovich, and just like Julius Farmer on bass. It was powerful stuff.
Burning music.
They were the hottest band in town, and if that was a powerful thing, immediately I was like, oh, that's not on the radio at all. OZ at the time was just getting started. They were upstairs at Tipatina putting their microphone through a hole in the floor. They would lower a mic onto the stage to record.
Oh, I love it.
To go live.
What kind of mic? I need to get a mic like that. That is fantastic. Well,
that was how they started.
Before my battery dies, what is your concept of love? I think you've already expressed how you give love to the world, but for people that fear is driving a lot of what's going on. What do you say to people? Talk to people about looking towards the light and not towards fear.
When I watch TV and I see, just the horrible decisions that our government's making for us, I become hopeless, and it just makes me cry every day. So I can't watch it. have to turn it off and look around me and see what's happening around me. I can't control that. All I can control is me. And so I'm going to do something. And otherwise, it's just I become too fearful, because I'm out of control. So what I can control, I can help kids, I can help Johnny, I can help maybe my friends in a small way. And then that's what I do.
What can you do to improve your world? I dig. I mean, that's really what it's about. I mean, as opposed to trying to bite off something so macro or looking at or digesting information that can be overwhelming. It's what you can do to change your world.
It's just look around you. Somebody needs you.
Deborah Vidacovich, such an honor to talk to you and meet you in person. Thank you for being part of the program.
Thank you.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you all later.